In this video, we are going to create a simple sign-up and login form from scratch using Spring Boot, Thymeleaf, and MySQL. By the end of this video, you will have a functional web app with a registration page, a login form, a page that only shows for logged-in users, and an account editing page. This is how I have structured this video. And remember, you can always check the timestamps in the description. First, we will talk about what is Spring Boot and its dependencies. Then, we will create our first controller to be able to visit the web. We will also learn how to pass values so that we can display information on the web based on these values. We will set up a user entity and work with databases, and we will set up the web structure with input validation. Afterwards, we will manage permission access to certain pages in our website and implement password hashing. Then we will create a page for the user to modify their information such as address, phone number, and so on. So let's start with the video. In this video, I'll be using IntelliJ Community Edition. So if you don't have IntelliJ installed, simply go to jetbrains.com/idea/download and then select your operating system that you are using. Usually it automatically selects the right one. Scroll down a little bit and you can see IntelliJ IDEA Community Edition. So simply download that. Then you need to install MySQL Workbench. Also select your operating system right here and install it. So what is Spring Boot? Spring Boot is a framework for building Java application. It's like a toolbox packed with a bunch of modules that help us build robust applications. For example, we currently want to build a website and talk to a database. There are modules specifically for that. Also, Spring is modular, meaning that we can choose the modules we need for our projects. Usually, if we want to build a web app, we need to set up a server, configure routing, and a bunch of other complex stuff that are time consuming. Spring Boot takes care of all this stuff for you. So, to create our first Spring Boot project, head over to start.spring.io, and here we're gonna select the Maven as a project, then the language is Java, obviously. Spring Boot, I'm gonna use the version 3.5.4. Now, the group, I'm gonna name it Condi Complex, the name Web Registration, packaging, I'm gonna keep it as a jar file, and Java 24. Now, it is recommended to use the same version as I do so you don't see any surprises later in this course. Now, we need the dependencies for our project. So dependencies are third-party libraries needed to build our project that are tested and verified by the Spring development team. So if you search for Spring Web, for example, or it's right here, and you select it, it gives us the ability to run a web app without the need to configure a web server. Let's select also Thymeleaf. Thymeleaf enables the injection of data from the Spring Boot application into an HTML template. So if you want to display the name of the logged in user, we can do that with Thymeleaf. So search for Thymeleaf. Next, we will use Lombok, which eliminates the need of manually writing repetitive code like getter and setters. Even though these can be generated in IntelliJ, it makes our code look cleaner. So Lombok is right here. Then we need the validation for input and output. Next, Spring Boot DevTools. So Spring Boot DevTools. Then Spring Security, which can be used for restricting user access in certain part of our applications. So Spring Security. Next, we need the Spring Data GPA and MySQL driver for our database. So Spring Data GPA and MySQL driver. So now let's generate our project. So generate. Perfect. So after you have generated a Spring Boot project, now you go to your downloads, you're gonna see a demo.zip file. So we right click it, we click extract here, and now we need to open IntelliJ Community Edition. So here we click open, okay, and we go to your downloads and you're gonna see a demo file. So simply click OK. Now after opening the project, we go to src main, Java, and we see web registration application. Now, as you can notice here, we can run the application, but if you go to another file, for example, pom.xml, we cannot run the application. So we need to add a configuration file. So we go back to the web registration application, and then we go to edit configuration, we add a new configuration, and here we're gonna name web registration. We select the first one, and then we're gonna rename it to main. We click apply, and then okay. Now let's run our application and see what happens. So our application failed because we did not configure a database. So a database is an organized collection of data stored in our computer. To manage our databases, we need a software called Database Management System, or DBMS. There are several DBMS like for relational databases such as SQL, and non-relational databases such as MongoDB. So MySQL is a relational DBMS since we use it for SQL. Now, we are not going to go into details in this video, so we will simply set up the database. So you need to open MySQL Workbench. So after opening MySQL Workbench, you're gonna enter a local instance. If you don't have a local instance, you need to add a new connection. So you click the plus icon, give a name. We're gonna keep everything as is right here. Username will be root, and here you're gonna type your password that you used for MySQL, and you can test the connection before clicking OK. So after you open a local instance right here, now I have a lot of databases right here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna add a new database for this project. So you click on this new schema. We're gonna name it web registration. We're gonna click apply. Now you're gonna get that script which will be executed. We click apply, click close, and here we're gonna see that you have a web registration. Now back to our project. Inside the resources, you're gonna see an application.properties file. Now, what I like to do is rename this to a YAML file. A YAML file is basically a configuration file which is more readable than the application.properties file. So here we're gonna click rename, and you're gonna change from application.properties to application.yaml. Gonna click refactor. Now, what I'm going to do is you're not gonna have these dots right here. So I'm gonna delete it, add this, and this. So this is the YAML format. It's way more readable. So to set up our database and link it to our project, we're gonna add a data source right here. Of course, gonna add a tab right here. Here, a data source. Then we're gonna get the URL. The URL will be JDBC MySQL. Make sure to not make any mistakes right here. Localhost on port 3306. Then we're gonna name it the web registration, which is the name of our database. And here, if it doesn't exist, we're gonna say create database if not exist equal to true. So in case it did not exist, it can be created. Now here the username will be root, and the password will be your password. In this case, my password is my new pass 123. Okay, so this is the YAML file. Now let's try and run our application. Great, our application runs perfectly. Now if you go to localhost port 8080, you're gonna get a login page, which means you're gonna type this password and the username user. So let's try to do it together. So you're gonna copy your password and go to localhost port 8080, hit enter. You're gonna see this sign in page. So you're gonna type user and you're gonna paste your password and hit sign in. Now obviously there is nothing to show after the sign in page, but the program works perfectly fine. In this section, we will see how we can create a controller to handle web requests. So first, let's create a new package called controllers. And inside this controllers package, we're gonna add a new Java class called home controller. Now, to mark this as a controller, we're gonna annotate it with @controller. And now we're gonna create a method called public string index, and we're gonna return index. Here we're gonna add a request mapping so that each person who goes to the root location or to this location, they will get the index.html file. So let's create first an index.html. We'll go to resources, templates, we create a new HTML file and name it index.html. So here let's add a title, let's say home, and here add h1 and let's say hello world. So now let's run our project, and by the way, here we don't need to add .html. Okay, so let's copy this password and go to Firefox. Now here let's say user, and let's paste the password and let's sign in. Perfect, we see the hello world message. Now what if we want to display the user's name on the website? In this case, we do not have any users and we haven't even set up anything inside our database yet. So we will pass the values manually. In this case, we need a class called model. Model is basically a container for data and helps us pass data from the controller to the view. So let's say model, and let's say model.add attribute. Here we're gonna name the attribute name. Let's give it, let's say it name, and here we're gonna give a value. Let's say coding complex. So now we go back to our index.html file, and here we're gonna add in the HTML. I'm gonna type xmlns, th for Thymeleaf, and I'm gonna press tab. Okay, so this is what we need to type. Here, let's delete this hello world, and we're gonna add th text be equal to hello, let's say. Then gonna say plus, and here gonna add a dollar and type name here. This name must match the one we wrote here as the attribute name. Let's run the program. Okay, so we go back, we see hello coding complex. Beautiful. Now let's fix our code a little. So let's go back to our home controller right here, and let's move the request mapping to the top. So here, gonna add the request mapping here. Let's remove the .html, and let's add a get mapping here. So we have various methods such as get, post, put, and delete. The get method is used to retrieve data, meaning that each time we enter a web URL, we are making a get request. A post method is used to submit data to a resource. For example, when a user registers a new account, the user will click the submit button and initiate a post request. So this is where we use the post mapping instead of get mapping, and to receive data from the user. We will go into more details later in this video. Now that we have an idea on how we can work with Thymeleaf, let's start with the register functionality. So let's create a new Java class. Let's say register controller. Also, we're gonna annotate it with controller, and we're gonna add a request mapping of register. Here, let's say public string register and return register. Okay, so here, okay, let's say get mapping. Now what we're gonna do is you're gonna go to getbootstrap.com and go to the docs section. Here we're gonna scroll down a little bit and use this HTML, right? So let's copy it. Let's go back to IntelliJ and create a new file. Let's name it register.html and let's paste it. Okay, of course we're gonna add the Thymeleaf right here. Now let's go back to getbootstrap.com and you're gonna scroll down a little bit until you see the forms section. Go to overview and you're gonna copy this. Okay, we're gonna copy this form. We're gonna go back to IntelliJ and we're gonna paste it instead of the H1. So here we paste it. Now let's run our program and see what we get. So here, if we go to register, we get here two fields, email and password. Okay, so now to register the user's input, we need a class like with attributes that we need, like first name, last name, email, password, and so on. Remember the model class? We will be using it here for this get mapping right here in the register. So, but instead we pass a string, we can pass an object. So using this object, we can record everything the user types in those fields and assign the user input to that object. Now, let's name this class an entity class user, and in the post mapping, we'll receive this object back and read the values from it. So, let's create a new package, name it entities, and inside this entities, gonna create a user. Now let's annotate this class with @entity. So this indicates that this is a JPA entity or Java Persistence API, which means it's intended to be used in a table within a relational database. Next, let's say table and give it a name of users. Okay. So now let's add the columns. So we need, of course, we need a name, email, and password. And let's say a private string phone. What do we need also? We need an address, string address, and also let's give it a role, private string role, and a private date creation. So now also we need an ID. Let's say private int ID, and let's annotate it with ID. Also, let's say generated value of type entity, which means we automatically generate unique values since this column will be a primary key. Okay, so this means that this is a primary key for this table. Now let's add getters and setters for this class. So since we added the Lombok as a dependency, we can simply do @getter and setter. So now let's run our program and see what happens. Okay, so we go back to MySQL Workbench, and here we have the web registration. Now let's refresh all and see nothing happens. It's because we need to add the extra information in our YAML file. So if you go to application.yaml, here we're gonna add JPA and show SQL true. Then in Hibernate, we're gonna add DDL auto to update, which is very important because it helps create our database and refresh it if we added or removed anything inside the user entity. So let's refresh. Okay, now let's go back to MySQL Workbench and hit refresh. Okay, so now we have a new table. Let's take a look at this table. So let's run it here. Okay, so we see the ID, we see the address, creation, email name, password, and so on. So everything is created. So let's click the ranch icon right here, and we see all of these column names. So right here, we see the ID and we see a yellow key, which means this is the primary key of this table. Now we see here PK, which is primary key, NN not null, and AI for auto increment. So also we see the data types here. We see varchar 255, date time, and everything here. So what do we need to change here? But first, let me tell you the difference between char and varchar. So let's say we are using char with 255 characters. Even if we are using only 5 characters, the other 250 characters will be reserved in memory, which is not ideal. So varchar is better to be used here. So Also, 255 is a lot. We don't need 255 characters for everything. So let's say we want to limit everything to 40 characters. Now, there is no magic number. It all depends on the requirements. So let's change them one by one. Also, let's mark the password as not null, the email, and the name. Okay, so let's hit apply. Okay, we get this script that will be executed. Let's say apply, and let's close. Now, let's go back to IntelliJ. Now, we don't need to refresh the program. So, first, let's delete this, okay? Because if you don't delete this and rerun the program, all the information that we wrote, for example, the varchar, will be at 255 because it auto updates depending on the information that is inside this class. So let's rerun. Okay, let's go back to MySQL Workbench. Perfect. Nothing has changed. So now let's try to create a new user object. So let's go to the register controller. Let's add user. Of course, we need to import it. Now here, if we try to set something like a name, we don't see anything. It's because we need to install the Lombok plugin. So we go to File, Settings, and Plugins, and search for Lombok. Here, the first option, which has over 20 million downloads, we click Install, and we hit Apply. Also, you need to restart. Alright, so after restarting, let's try and set the name. User.set. Okay, so now we see everything. Let's say set name to coding complex. So everything is working perfectly fine. So our program is running perfectly. Now, how to save this user to our database? This is where we use repositories. It's an interface that lets us perform database operations without writing SQL queries. It's a very powerful concept that Spring Data JPA offers. So let's create a new package right here. Let's name it repositories. And inside, we're gonna create a new Java class user repository. Now, select interface right here and press enter. Now, this interface will extend JPA repository. JPA repository. Now here we're gonna give it two parameters. The first one will be user and the other will be integer. So user inside the demo entity and integer. Now user is the name of our entity class and integer is the type of the primary key in that class. Okay, so this is all we need to do. So let's go back to the register class and let's add some more information. So user.set email and set password. Okay, now what do we need to do? What we need is we're gonna create a new variable here, a final user repository. Okay, now to fix this issue we need to put all args constructor right here. Okay, now here let's save the user to the user repository. So user repository dot save user. Now let's run our program. Now since we have written this logic inside the register method, this means when we enter the register domain, we're gonna get a new user. So first let's see the MySQL workbench and check that there is nothing here. So refresh all. Okay, now let's go back. Let's write here register, enter. Okay, so now if we go back to MySQL workbench and say refresh, okay, we have a name and we have the password and ID is 1. Okay, now if you go back here, we see hibernate has inserted into users. We have address, creation, all of these. Okay. Now, since these other are null, they are shown as null inside MySQL Workbench. So we have only used name, email, and password. Now, when we start adding more information for the user, it's gonna look big and ugly. So we have an annotation called builder, which makes this code look cleaner. So let's go to the entities class user, say builder, and now let's go back to the register controller. Here we're gonna delete all of this and say user.builder.build. Now here let's add name, let's say coding builder. I'm gonna add an email and a password. Now let's rerun our program. So if you go back here and refresh this page and go back to MySQL Workbench, refresh this table, here we see coding builder. Okay, beautiful. So we have seen how to save a user to a database. Now let's focus on the important part, which is getting the user input from the registration form and save them to the database. For that, we need to create a new class inside a DTO package. A DTO stands for Data Transfer Object. So let's create a package, name it DTOs, and here I'm gonna create a Java file. Let's name it register DTO. So let's annotate it with data, which is getter and setters for this. Now, what do we need? We need a name, of course. We don't want it empty, so not empty. Then we're gonna need an email, so private string email. Again, not empty, and we're gonna annotate it with email. Also, we need a password, so private string password. Here we're gonna add a size. So the size of the password will be min equal to 4, max equal to 40, which is the size that we put in our database. And message password must be between 4 and 40 characters. Also, we need a private string confirm password, and we're gonna need a phone and an address. Okay, great. Now let's pass this object into our register website. So go back to register. Let's clean this up. Here we add model. Of course, we want to import this class. So that attribute will be new register DTO. Okay. Now in the registration form, let's go there. Here we need to define the method, which is a post request. Here we have talked about post request before. It's when we want to submit data. Th object will be equal to register DTO. So register DTO. Now we need to add also in the input field for the email, again th field be equal to also dollar register DTO dot email. Okay, we'll do the same thing for the password. Let's add th field equal dollar sign register DTO dot password. Make sure to have the spelling correctly. I'm gonna create more input fields for all the other parameters that we need. So I'll come back after everything is done. And of course, you can get the code from my GitHub repository or write them when we see it together. So here we have the full name, email address, phone number, address, password, and confirm password. So now there is something important that we need to add. So let's add it. Say input. We put the type to hidden. All right. And now th name will be equal to dollar sign and underscore, then CSRF for cross-site request forgery dot parameter name. Okay, and then we're gonna add a th value equal to $sign again. Open up this and underscore csrf dot token. And of course, here I need to fix it. All right. Okay. So this is to prevent CSRF or cross-site request forgery. It's a type of attack where it tricks a user to submit a malicious request to a website where they are already authenticated. Also, if you do not add this, it will break our code and will not be able to submit the form anymore. So to save our user, let's go back to the register controller. And here we're gonna add a post mapping. So public string register. Okay, so here we're gonna add the model attribute and the valid annotation for the register DTO, and we don't need the model for now. Okay, so here we're gonna add a post mapping, and inside we're gonna say user. Okay, so I'm gonna click tab to autocomplete everything. So here we are adding name from register DTO, email, password, phone, address, and then we are adding the role, which is user. Okay, and creation, and then we are building. And of course, we're gonna save it to the database. And here we're gonna return the register again. Okay, so let's test our program. Let's run it. So here, let's register. User, paste the password. Okay, so now let's go to slash register. So we see this form. Let's start coding. Complex c1@gmail.com. Phone number, anything for now. All right. So now let's click submit. Okay, so we have submitted the form. Now, if you go back to MySQL and refresh it, beautiful. Here we see that we have saved the user to our database. All right, so everything is working fine, but we are seeing this login page everywhere. So to fix this, we need a new configuration. So let's create a new package called config. And inside this package, we're gonna create a new Java class called security config. All right. So first, we want to annotate it with configuration, and then with enable web security. Inside, we're gonna create a public security filter chain. All right. And inside, we're gonna give it a parameter. So HTTP security. Okay. Here, we're gonna annotate it with bean. So bean is used to define a method to create an object to be managed by the Spring IOC container or inversion of control. So IOC means that we are giving the control of creating and managing objects to the Spring framework so that it controls the life cycle of that object instead of our code. So here we return HTTP security, let's say dot authorize HTTP request auth to auth. By the way, this is a lambda expression, which is a shorthand way to pass a function to a method. So inside, we're gonna add a request matchers. So slash dot permit all. Also, we're gonna give access to the login page for everyone and the register. So request matchers register dot permit all. Here, we're gonna add also any request dot authenticated, and of course we're gonna build. So here we are getting this error. Let's see, we need to add an exception. So throws exception. All right, and here we're gonna add something else for our password encoder. So public password encoder, and here we're gonna return a new bcrypt password encoder. And of course, we want to annotate it. Oh, sorry. Of course, we're gonna annotate it with bean also. So here at bean. So now let's go back to our register controller and encode our password. So here, go to password, say new bcrypt password encoder dot encode register DTO dot get password. So now let's refresh our program and see if our security config is working perfectly. So here let's go to slash register. Okay, so now we can access the register page, but there's one problem. If you go to the login, you cannot access it. So to fix this, let's go to our security config and let's add dot form login. Okay, let's say form here form dot default success URL. So when someone is logged in successfully, we want to take them to the profile. Okay, and true. Now, since they are successfully logged in, we only want the users to be able to go to the profile section. So here we add this as role user, and now let's test this. So we refresh our program first. Okay, perfect. And let's try to access the register form. Okay, so everything is working perfectly. However, it's not ideal to hardcode the user role. So let's add an enum in the entities package. So new Java class, let's name it role and select enum. Here we're gonna add user and admin. So let's go back to security config, say role.user.name, and let's go back to our register controller, do the same here. So role.user.name. Now to complete the register HTML file, let's add a message to tell the user that the account has been registered successfully. So let's go to register.html and add the following. So first, let's add a div, and inside we're gonna say th if success, and we're gonna add a class alert and a role of alert. Inside we're gonna add success, and here we're gonna add a link class, or without a class, we have a link to the login page, and here we're gonna say login. All right, and here we're gonna add a button. So button, and the type will be button here, and this will be the closing tag. So class will be btn-close and area label to close. But first, let's add the following to our register controller. So let's go back. Here in our model, we're gonna add attribute of success and gonna set it to false. And here in our post mapping, after saving the user, we're gonna say model, but of course we want to add the model here. So model. Here we're gonna say model dot add attribute success to true. Now let's refresh our program. All right, let's refresh. I'm gonna fill anything right here. Hit submit, we go to our login page. We did not get a notification. So let's see what happens here. Here we are getting an exception. data truncation, data too long for column password at row 1. So here in MySQL, we have set, if you click the ranch icon, we have set the password to varchar of 40. So let's change it. Let's say varchar of 100. Okay. Now we hit apply and we say apply. Close. Okay. So now let's go back and refresh our application. All right. So let's fill the form again. Okay. Now we get the success message here and we have the login. So let's click login and let's go back to MySQL and refresh. Here we see cc2@gmail.com, perfect. And here we see the hashed password. So everything is working perfectly. So now let's try to sign in. So let's say cc2@gmail.com, input the password, sign in, we get invalid credentials. This is because we need a service for that. So let's go back and create a new package called services. And inside we're going to create a new class called user service. Now of course going to annotate it with a service, and let's say this is going to implement the user details service. Okay, so now let's create public user details load by username. Okay, so here we're gonna give an email, and inside we're gonna say user, and here we're gonna need to create a new private final user repository, and of course we're gonna add all our constructor. So here user repository dot find by email. Of course we don't have it yet, so let's go back to our user repository. Let's add the return type user find by email, and here string email. Now let's go back to our service. Here I'm gonna add email. So now we have one small problem, is that we imported user from the Spring security core, not our user that we created. So we right click, we change the variable to user, and here if we click control and then click it, we go to the user that we created. Okay, so let's continue. So if the user is not null, what we're gonna do is we're gonna return here the user that we're gonna return is inside the security core dot user details and not our user that we created. So let's select that. Now here we're gonna add dot with username user dot get email dot password user dot get password, and then the role get role dot build. Okay, now in case we did not find a user with this email, we're gonna throw a new username not found exception and say username user not found with email, and we're gonna paste the email here. Okay, now let's try to sign in. So let's refresh our program. Here we go back, we put the email. Now let's say I typed a wrong password. Let's click sign in. If we go back, we get an exception. So to fix this issue, we need to go back to the user, and here we're gonna add all args constructor and no args constructor. Sorry, no args constructor. Okay, so let's refresh our program. Okay, so let's say I put a random password, click sign in. We go back, we see Hibernate tried to select the user, but we did not get anything because the password is incorrect. Perfect. Now let's try to sign in. So here, type this, sign in. Okay, now we got redirected to the profile. Now since we do not have any controller for the profile, we are getting this error. So don't worry about it. Now let's add the logout functionality. So if you go back to security config and here add dot logout config dot logout success URL. So when someone logs out, they go to this directory. Okay, so let's try to log out. So if you go back, we type here slash logout, click logout. Okay, nice. Next, we're gonna work with the profile controller. Now let's work on the profile. So we create a new profile controller. So profile controller, and we're gonna annotate it with controller. Then all args constructor and request mapping of profile. Inside, we're gonna say private final user repository, okay, and here we're gonna add a public string profile, and we're gonna annotate it with a get mapping, and we're gonna return profile. Nothing new here, so let's work with the profile.html to see what to display for the user. So let's create a new profile.html, so profile.html, and inside I'm gonna add a basic HTML that displays the user's email and role. Now, SEC authentication is a Thymeleaf attribute that is used to display the information about the current logged in user. So we don't need a model or anything to pass the email and role. Now before we continue, let's validate our input in the register controller class. So let's go back, and here let's add a new parameter. Let's say binding result. So binding result is an interface within the Spring Framework's validation. We can use it as a container to hold results of our data validation. So here, let's add an if statement. So if the register DTO dot get password is not equal, so let's say here not register DTO dot get password dot equals register DTO dot get confirm password. Here we're gonna add inside the binding result, let's say dot add error. Inside we're gonna say a new field error. Now we're gonna add an object name, so the object is register DTO, then the field confirm password, and we say passwords do not match. Okay, now let's see if the email is already registered in the database. So if you go here, let's say user exists equal to user repository dot find by email register DTO dot get email. So if this user is not null, meaning that it is existing in our database, we're gonna add a binding result dot add error. Okay, so I'm gonna auto complete that. Email already exists, so let's change this to email. Okay, now if the binding result contains any error, we're gonna return register. Okay, now let's wrap these inside a try catch block. So let's take this, gonna paste it here, and here we're gonna catch an exception, say error in registration, and we're gonna paste the get message. All right, now let me fix this and let's move this up. So Let's paste it here. And here I'm gonna return register. Okay. So let's run the program. And you go back. Here, I'm gonna fill anything. Let's say we use the same email. So here 1, 2, 3. Okay. We submit and you don't see the registered successful message. If you go back to MySQL and refresh, see the name is still CC1, so everything is working well. But there is one issue. We are not seeing the error message that we want to display here. So let's go back to the register.html and we're gonna add the following. So let's go for the email. Here I'm gonna add a paragraph. Here I'm gonna add thf equal $. Here I'm gonna add fields dot has error and we're gonna give email. Alright, now we close that and here we're gonna add ATH error class of text danger and we're gonna add ATH errors to register DTO. So register DTO dot email. So now I'm going to copy and paste this paragraph for the password and confirm password and change the attributes and I'll come back with the complete form. So here we have added the field for the password and confirm password. Now, why do I need this field for password if you're only going to return an error for the confirm password? Well, let's try and test the program here. So if you go back and let's say we have an invalid password that do not match, we have password do not match. But if we add, for example, this password with a length of 3, click submit, we get password must be between 4 and 40 characters. Now this message comes from the register DTO that we created and this is the message that it is returned. So you can also add messages in here. That was everything we needed to do for the input validation, and of course you can add more validations and test things out for yourself. Now let's go back to our profile controller. And so we have seen that we need to provide a model so that the user input will be saved in the provided class object. But what do we do if we want to display the information that he already has? So when the user wants to edit the phone number that has been submitted during the registration, we want to display that value in the edit page in the field of the phone number. So what we can do is supply the model with an object that already contains the user information and then retrieve that object and use its values after the user has modified them. So let's try it. So here we add public string edit profile and here let's add a get mapping to edit. Now let's give it a model. So model dot add attribute, it's a user. But how do you know which user is currently signed in? This is where we use the principal class. The principal class let us know the current user that is logged in. So here we add a principal, and here I'm gonna say user equal user repository dot find by email principal dot get name. Principal dot get name returns the email address of the current logged in user. So here we pass user. But there's one problem. We don't want to supply all these information like role, creation, or even email. Even though we will not use them to update the existing user, it can make our code vulnerable or it can lead to someone in the future to let the user modify information that should not be modified. So to prevent this, we will create a new DTO with only the fields that we want them to be updated. So let's go to DTOs, new Java class, let's say update user request. Now here I'm gonna annotate it with data and with builder. Okay. So here what we want to change, you can change the name, the phone, the address. Now let's add an email. So private string email. It's true that we have the email field listed here, but we need it to display the user's information. Of course, there is another way, but I want to show you something important when we test for vulnerabilities. Now let's work with the HTML file. So let's create a new file called edit profile.html, and here I'm gonna copy all the content in the register to the edit profile. So first, there's an easier way to specify the name of the model attribute. Here, we are prefixing each term with register DTO. So for example here, we are using register DTO.name. There's an easier way. You can simply do this. So we delete all of this and put a star. So since it's already specified on top, we only have to modify this to update user request. Also, I will only keep the name, email, address, and phone number. So for the email, we'll make it read only. So I'll do these changes and come back so you will see what I have done together. And of course, you can check out the code in GitHub. The link is in the description. Okay, so everything is done. So we have the name, the email, the phone, and the address. Now, before testing our code, let's go back to our profile controller. Here, we have to use update user request. Okay, so now let's run the program. All right, so let's use this email. Let's sign in. Okay, perfect. We got welcome, we got the email, and our role. So now let's click on edit profile. Perfect. We see all this information. We see our full name, which can be deleted. You can modify it. The email is read only. The phone number can be modified, and the address also can be modified. Now, there's one thing that I want to mention. And edit profile, I have used this read only keyword for the email. Okay, so now let's work on the post request. Let's go to our profile controller. Let's say public string edit profile. Now here we're gonna use a model, then we're gonna use an update user request. So let's use valid model attribute update user request, and we're gonna use a binding result. So inside, let's put them inside a track catch block. So user equal to user repository dot find by email, and now I'm gonna click tab, and here I'm gonna add an if statement. So if binding result that has errors, we're gonna return to the edit profile. So here we are setting the name from the update user request, we're setting the phone and the address. So we are not changing the email address here, and then we are saving the user. So let's add a catch block exception, and I'm gonna delete this and put here edit profile. Okay, now using the model, I'm gonna move this, add parentheses here. I'm gonna say model, so that attribute update user request in case of any errors. So now I'm gonna annotate this as post mapping edit profile, or edit, not edit profile. Okay, so now let's refresh our application. Now let's try to change the user's information. So let's change the phone number. So let's say 12234. The email cannot be changed, and the name to CC3. Let's hit submit. Okay, now let's go to MySQL Workbench. Let's refresh. Now we got CC3, and this is the phone number. Perfect. However, here we are finding the email of the assigned email to the update user request. So we're reading it from the browser. So let's try something. Go to your browser and hit inspect right here. Now let's change this value. Let's say cc1@gmail.com. Okay. So if you go to MySQL, I have cc1 and the name is coding complex. Okay. So let's change this to let's say cc modified. Okay. Now if you click submit and we go to network, here we see a post request. The post request, and you see here request. So what we have sent is we have sent inside the update user request the name, the email cc1, not cc2, okay, the phone and the address. So now if you go to MySQL Workbench and we hit refresh, see, we have changed the name of an account that you are not even signed in as. So this is very bad, and you have seen previously how to see who is logged in as. So try to fix the issue and come back and see my solution. So the solution is to use the principal. So let's say principal, and here instead of getting the email from the update user request, we say principal dot get name. Okay, so now let's refresh. Okay, so here I'm gonna refresh the browser. All right, so here I'm gonna say cc, let's say 10. Okay, I'm gonna modify this, let's say again to cc1. All right, now let's submit. Okay, let's go to the network tab. All right, so let's see the post request and we go to request. Here we see cc1, but if you go to MySQL here, refresh, we see cc10 from cc2@gmail.com. So what we are doing here is we are getting the email from the logged in user. So this email field is not necessary anymore. It's still better not to pass unnecessary values like these. So this is what we'll be doing next. So as you have done in the profile to list the email, we will do the same here. So inside the profile, we had SEC authentication. We will add the same inside the edit profile section. So first, let's delete all of this. Delete this from the label. Now here, I'm gonna add span SEC authentication equal to name. So import namespace, and let's go back to the profile controller. Now here, we're gonna delete the dot email, not gonna add it anymore. And we're gonna go back to the update user request DTO and delete this field. Now let's run our program. So let's try to change the name. So let's say CC, and here if you inspect, there is no field anymore. So even if you try to modify this email address, so let's say CC1, and let's try to submit, go to network. Inside the post request, let's go to request, and here we don't see the email anymore. So our program is pretty much complete, and what I have done here is used AI to add some CSS to the register profile and edit profile to make it prettier. So let's test our code one last time. Let's refresh. Okay, now let's register an account. Okay, let's add coding complex and the email codingcomplex@gmail.com. Put anything here. Now let's add a password. Okay, account created successfully. Now let's log in. So coding complex, sign in. Okay, so this is the profile page. We have our email address and our user role, which is user. Now let's edit our profile. So here, let's say coding edited, and here let's add 456. Now before that, let's make sure that in MySQL the user is registered. So here we have the account. Okay, now let's go back and hit update profile. Okay, now let's go back to MySQL Workbench. Okay, perfect. You've reached the end of this video. I hope you have learned a lot. This is actually my first video with voiceover, so if you have any suggestions for me to improve, I would really appreciate your feedback. You can share your thoughts in the comment section, and of course don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, and I hope to see you in my future videos.